Hello and welcome to our online worship devotions. My name is Alex Bradley and I'm a Unitarian minister serving a congregation called Brook Street Chapel in the town of Knutsford in Cheshire. So who are we? We are a congregation that is Christian with a difference. Most of us would call ourselves Unitarians, a few Trinitarians, a few would describe themselves as doubters or seekers or eclectic in their beliefs. All of us are liberal religious people. So whether you are young or old, straight or gay, employed or unemployed or retired, from whatever background or circumstances you may come, you are all equally and warmly welcome to our spiritual community. And we hope that when the restrictions imposed by the pandemic are over, that some of you will be able to visit us in our ancient and beautiful chapel building here in Knutsford. The theme of our worship today is communication, both human and animal. And I begin with some words from two sources as I light our flame to begin our worship. Firstly, some words from the book of Proverbs. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. And from an anonymous writer. An animal's eyes have the power to speak a great language. And now some words from a hymn written by the Reverend Principal Bruce Finlow, a former principal of Harris Manchester College in Oxford, which is one of the two colleges responsible for training future Unitarian ministers in this country. And these are Bruce Finlow's words. We come as we are to worship and pray, unsure of ourselves, unsure what to say. Oh, may we be patient and willing to be receptive and open to hear and to see. The God of our life is ever at hand, but not to be called by our proud command. The tides of the Spirit have their ebb and flow, and we must be patient and move as they go. Oh, let us be glad and hungry of heart to wait upon God and learn our own part, to give life the best of the powers we have as servants of life and clear channels of love. And following those beautiful words of Bruce Finlow's, a short prayer. Light eternal, thine is the beauty of this fair and friendly day, whose joy shines within our souls as in the heavens above. Thy spirit broods over earth and sea and sky. The order and the beauty of this world are thine, and to thee they pay their silent worship. To us thou hast given voice that our hearts may sing thy praise. May all that is beautiful remind us of thee, the infinite beauty. May all that is good remind us of thee, the perfect goodness. May all that is true lead us to thee, the source of all truth. Amen. And our first reading is taken from the first book of the Bible, the book called Genesis, and it's one of the two creation stories to be found in that book. And it is important to remember that these stories are not to be taken as literal statements of fact. Rather, they are stories which illustrate spiritual truths. And intelligent Christians from the earliest days have always recognized this fact. The great Origen of Alexandria, the 2nd to 3rd century theologian and philosopher and writer, one of the greatest intellects of the early church, said how foolish it was to understand these texts as literal history. They are to be taken in a spiritual sense. And so from the book of Genesis. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the cattle according to their kinds, and everything that creeps upon the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was so good. Then God said, let us make humankind in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed with its fruit, you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw that everything he had made was good, and there was an evening, and there was a morning, a 6th day. And our second reading was sent to me several years ago by a Unitarian friend from the Newcastle under Lyme Unitarian Meeting House, and it's a poem about an animal by a man called Frank Purchstein. And the poem sent to me by Arthur Holt was this poem, The Last Will and Testament of Agnes. My material possessions are few, and I leave them to you all. A collar chewed on one end with 2 studs missing, a lumpy dog bed and my chipped water dish. I leave you half a rubber ball which you will find under the refrigerator, a rubber mouse with a whistle missing, located behind the kitchen stove, and dozens of bones under the rose bushes and the flower beds. Mostly I leave you my memories, which are many. I leave you the memory of soft brown eyes, a stubby tail, a brown flecked nose, and my wine at the back door. I leave you the spot of sunshine that was cast through the window onto the living room at 4 o'clock winter afternoons, which I appropriated for my own as I curled into a ball. I leave you a tattered rug in front of your easy chair, which was not repaired with exactly the same kind of yarn. I chewed it when I was a senseless 5-month-old puppy. Remember? I leave you a hollow trench which you will find under the bushes near the front porch, where I found asylum during the hot summer days. It's full of leaves now, so you might have trouble finding it. I bequeath you the sound I made scampering through a carpet of October leaves when we tramped together through the woods. I leave you remembered moments of mornings sitting together on the bank, awaiting that first nibble. I remember your laughter at my encounter with the rabbit I couldn't catch. I leave you my devotion, my sympathy when things go wrong, my bark when you raise your voice in needless anger, and my frustration when I curl my tail beneath me when you scold me. I never went to church and never heard a sermon. Yet without ever having spoken a word in my life. I leave you lessons in patience, tolerance, love, and understanding. The last will and testament of Agnes, written by Agnes's master, Frank Purchstein. The communication that we have with one another and with animals is often flawed and difficult. Quite often we get it wrong. It's partly because we find it difficult at the best of times. It is said that only 7% of communication is verbal. So much depends on bodily posture and a great deal on facial expressions, which is why in this present period when we're all supposed to wear face coverings, mostly masks, it's so difficult to tell what the other person is thinking or feeling. It's difficult to get used to the idea that we can't easily see the other person. We can't know what they are thinking or feeling. And so in that, we have the problem, what can we do to communicate better? I like the words of George Eliot. Animals are such agreeable friends. They ask no questions, they pass no criticisms. Now, most of us, even the closest friends, will pass some criticisms of one another from time to time, if only to be helpful or to try to be helpful. Sometimes such criticisms are not necessarily well received or appreciated. But communication is difficult, even when we share the same language. It was Winston Churchill who, being half American himself by birth, said of the English language and American and English people that we are divided by a common language. So how can we communicate better? I think that reading from the first book of the Bible, Genesis, reminds us that everything put in this world is good. Not just we human beings who are set over it to have dominion, or perhaps a bird that is perhaps more helpful, stewardship, but that it belongs, all of it, to the divine creator. That we are stewards of that creation, and that it is our responsibility not to act as owners, free to do what we will, no matter how much harm it may cause to the other species, or indeed to our fellow human beings, but rather that we are set in place, having responsibility to be good and faithful stewards. And the example of the animals can be an example to us of how we may be good and faithful stewards. Because it is not enough to use good words. It is actions that count. I like the story of the dog that saved its master. It is quite literally a shaggy dog story from a few years ago. A man of 70 was saved from a stroke on his houseboat and freezing to death from that by his 70-pound dog that wrapped itself around his body and kept him warm for 9 hours. That story reminds us that we communicate not simply through words, but through our bodies. We communicate through our actions. We are not only what we say, but what we do. And this is a vital Unitarian principle, a principle derived from the great Jewish tradition and from the teaching of Jesus, that a tree is known by its fruits. It is said that St. Francis preached a sermon to the birds. We all know that a dog or cat can often curl up alongside its master when he or she is ill or unwell, in a way that it doesn't usually do when the owner is in good health. I know of at least one person this week who has lost her much loved dog. And those of us who have had a pet of some kind will know the sense of loss that is brought about by having lost that pet. How much more the case is it if we can look at the animals who have not the facility of language and yet can show their love and care and devotion and loyalty to us? How much more is it possible, and how much more should we not actually show our love and loyalty and kindness to one another? And in that passage from the Bible, which, as I mentioned earlier, should not be taken as literal history, but rather as a spiritual parable or story illustrating basic spiritual and ethical truths, that story teaches us that all that is created in this world is good, that the present campaigns to preserve this world, to prevent some of the worst ravages of climate change, which has already begun, to take care for the variety and diversity of species, both plant and animal, to care for the environment, is not simply a useful and necessary thing for our survival, but is a sacred duty given us because we are stewards of this earth and this creation. It is the height of hubris, the overweening pride that leads to a fall, that makes us think that we are owners, masters of this creation. Rather, we are to work together in harmony with all life and in harmony with the Creator who gave us this beautiful world. However we understand and interpret our idea of creation and the divine, in that concept we have a transcendent grounding for this belief that all life, both human and other life, is sacred, is special, and deserving of respect and care. May that be our prayer as Unitarians and Free Christians and liberal religious people, to care and love for this precious earth, this world in which we have been placed. And now a blessing upon our worship. May the God who is love, truth, beauty, and peace be with us this day and every day. Amen.